This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are back in the studio this week, and we are broadcasting live. Plus, we also are live on Facebook and over at Zoom. Each week, you can join us by going over to killerinnovations.com/live. Today's show, we have a special guest. Now, Rodney Williams, who's our guest today, and I've met about a year ago, I guess it was, at an event that I host up at Keystone, Colorado, called Summer Conference. Rodney's company, Listener, was a company that was competing in what we call the Innovation Showcase. So we pick 8 to 10 companies, and they get a chance to have 8 to 10 minutes on stage to present to about 450 other executives. And afterwards, Rodney and I actually spent a fair amount of time together. But before we get into that, I want to give you a little bit of background on Rodney here. Now, I got Rodney's bio. He's probably sweating now because he doesn't know what the heck I'm going to say about him. He's the CEO, co-founder of Listener. We're going to talk more about Listener. It's in the IoT space. He is the 2016 Black Enterprise Tech Entrepreneur of the Year and has also been honored by Ad Age's Top 40 Under 40 and the Upstart 100. Prior to Listener, Rodney started his career at Procter & Gamble, and he and I never worked at Procter & Gamble. I did a lot of work at P&G with their innovation team, so we're going to talk a little bit about P&G. But he also has patents, even though he comes from a marketing background. He's also a former Lockheed Martin and Department of Engineer disruptor. And he had 4 degrees by the time he was 24, including an MBA and a master's in integrated marketing communications from Howard University. So Rodney, albeit you and I talked a lot a year ago in Colorado, it wasn't until I got to read your full bio that I'm like, okay, now I know why he is where he's at. So, hey, Rodney, thanks a lot for taking your Sunday and joining us here on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, the other thing I'm going to share with the listening audience today is Rodney and I also have a little other common love, and that is for Cincinnati. Rodney actually, albeit he's never there, that's his home. Cincinnati was where I was born and where my family's all from. And if you're from Cincinnati, you know about the Cincinnati chili parlors. And I had to give Rodney a little test when we first met on whether he was which of the 2 chili parlors he liked. And needless to say, he got the answer correct. So that's how he got invited onto the show. If he'd said Gold Star, I probably would not have had you on. No, only joking. So, hey, Rodney, give us a little bit of background on yourself. Where did you grow up? Are you always, you haven't always been a Cincinnati kid.
No, I actually grew up in Baltimore, Maryland.
Baltimore, yes.
Yeah. So I'm a Ravens guy, excited about football coming back.
Well, you can't be a Bengals fan.
Unfortunately, I'm not.
So did you have siblings? Yeah,
I'm the youngest of 6.
Youngest of 6. Sounds like my wife. My wife's is the kind of the pseudo middle of 6. So I'm used to having. I'm married into a big family. So you were the youngest, though.
I was the youngest, and I was the youngest by 7 years.
Wow.
The joke was that my childhood was totally different than everyone else's.
Or at least that's what your siblings tell you, right?
Yeah, because I have no clue. I can't cross-reference check. I don't have any experience. But my family is actually originally from Jamaica as well.
Okay.
So
was your childhood kind of a normal childhood growing up? I could see you as one of those kids that's the first kid on the block to have a lemonade stand with a credit card swipe on it or something.
Yes, I tend to have the deals. My mom always says my mom owned a beauty shop. So my first job or my first way of getting money was that I used to rent out magazines to the guests at the beauty shop because I thought that my mom had bad magazines. So if you guys were a Scholastic kid, and I was a Scholastic, and you used to be able to buy books from Scholastic, it was like a subscription form. I would get all the newer magazines that were pretty hip, and I would walk around with a briefcase, and I would charge 50 cents to rent a magazine.
And how many people in your mom's beauty parlor would rent a magazine from you?
Oh, everyone. I would make about $3 to $5 a day renting magazines easily as a kid. And my mom always got mad, and my brothers, because I would always have money. I would always have at least $20 in my pocket. To me, as a kid, that was a pretty big deal.
Well, for any kid, it's a pretty big deal, right? Always having $20 in your pocket. Oh, that's funny. I could see you walking around with a briefcase too. Did you have a little tie on? Did you get your little tie going?
Yeah, I tried to show up with a certain level of showmanship.
Yeah. You had to have that flash, man. You had to have the flash.
Yeah, I like to think that they bought the magazine in the smile. So.
and you were probably one of the. How old were you when you were doing this?
I was about 7 and 8.
Okay, so you were still in the cute age period too, right? So cute kid, dressed real sharp, had the tie, little briefcase, but you had the hip magazines.
Had the magazines. I always joked about it because it was right around the same time the other kids in the neighborhood wanted to cut lawns, and I totally was not about that. I was like, I think I can do something a little bit different.
So when you were growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your kind of, some kids wanted to be firemen, policemen. What was your thing when you were growing up? What did you want to be?
Well, the interesting thing is I used to watch Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. That was my favorite show growing up, and with Robin Leach. And I understand it's but as a kid in Baltimore, it was the first time I would see. A lot of the guests on that show were owners, they were CEOs, they were really accomplished professionals. And I used to always wonder, like, what did they study? What did they create? And there was a common thread. They all were owners or creators. And I always wanted to do something like that. I wanted to figure out how to become that.
And so, so your dream was what? To start a company, or?
The dream was I always wanted to be a successful CEO of a huge company, and I even to this day, since day one, I've always told everyone a listener never to call listener a startup. I've always hated calling it a startup. We didn't do this to become a startup. We did this to become a great company that hopefully brings a great innovation to market. But even as a kid, it was really all about owning something, and I wanted to be. I had a knack to be a CEO, and I wanted to do that. As a kid, it started off with normal stuff, right? I wanted to be in entertainment. I thought I could be a great actor or something. Who knows? But as things progressed, it became clear that I wanted to be a CEO.
Yeah, but I think what's different though is that you recognize that, as you said, you don't like calling listener a startup. We'll get more into listener a little bit later, but that you wanted to build a great company. And a lot of the CEOs that I talk to, that's not their priority. They're into the build and flip versus really building a company that's got a longer term view of themselves rather than fast and out.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. I think that I tell people all the time. I'm not an entrepreneur. I call myself an innovator. I'm doing this because I had an idea that kept me up every night, and we had to go out and turn that into a great company. I think just the idea alone is not a great company. It's a great idea, or it's a great product. Continually driving innovation is just something that came out of what we've accomplished. So it's just a different mindset. But it's something that I wish we all focused on versus the quick flip. If this thing flips, that's a great outcome. But my goal is to create a viable product in a market that penetrates it well.
Yeah, well, I think that's a key point because, the number of companies though that don't make the investments to really build a company on a solid foundation with long-term objectives. Yeah, if you flip it, someone comes in and acquires you. If Google comes in and dumps a bunch of money on you, God bless you. You guys deserve it. But at the same time, a lot of people don't put that investment up front to really think about their business from a standpoint of long-term and building a great business. So kudos to you on that. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to jump out and take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick up our conversation with Rodney Williams, the CEO and co-founder of Listener. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the Biz Talk Radio Network.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Thank you for coming back and joining us. We're picking up our conversation with Rodney Williams, CEO and co-founder of Listener. Listener was a company, and Rodney participated in an event I hosted about a year ago as part of the Innovation Showcase. We'll get more into Listener here in a little bit. But Rodney, I wanted to pick up. We heard about your first entrepreneurial efforts in renting magazines. But I saw in your degree, in the list of your degrees, you have an MBA, but you have a degree in integrated marketing from Howard. What the heck is integrated marketing?
All right, so the integrated marketing degree was actually from West Virginia University.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I went to undergrad at West Virginia. It was, at the time, I actually ran a promotional company called 220 Productions. And we were doing things like email campaigns and throwing events. And I actually started to understand that I had a knack for marketing. At the time, I also had a job offer to work at Lockheed Martin. So while I started to work at Lockheed, I did the integrated marketing degree. I thought it was a way for me to get a broad sense of marketing, and that's kind of what it was. It talked about marketing in a sense of every attribute, right? The fact that there's a social element, there's a press element, there's direct marketing, there's indirect, there's all the different components that make the entire marketing story. And it was actually a great degree. It was a great degree that kind of, again, sparked my interest in marketing and made me go after P&G in a big way.
So you ended up at P&G. So, Procter & Gamble is viewed by many in the world as kind of being a great, almost like a postgraduate degree program. You go become a product manager at Procter & Gamble and get put through the P&G process. So what did you learn? You were there, 4 years? Is that right?
Yeah.
So what did you learn over the 4 years? Because you were a product manager at P&G, right?
Yeah, I was a brand manager.
Oh, brand manager. That's right.
Yeah. I first of all, I always say I worked with the smartest people I ever met outside of Listener. But it was an incredible learning ground. I mean, the talent that's there, the pace, the expertise across, the autonomy that they give you the moment you get in the door. I mean, there's a high level of confidence in the way they recruit, in the way they give responsibility to each employee. And I loved it. A lot of my mentors are still there. A lot of the people that I look up to. And I got a chance to, when I started to work at Pampers, Lucas Watson, who was at Google. He was at YouTube for a bit. Now he's at Intuit, I think. But Jody Allen was also on Pampers. And I just had these incredible leaders that let me think and try to build a great business.
So who would have thought that the path to Silicon Valley was through diapers?
So what's interesting, when you look at the diaper alumni, there's a lot of folks went digital because if anything about Diapers was the first P&G product to ever sell online. And at one point in time, it was 52% of the e-commerce business of P&G as a whole.
Was Diapers.
Diapers. It's just when a mom becomes, the first thing that happens when a mom becomes pregnant and she knows the sex of her baby, she goes online and she asks other moms for help. So it's actually an extremely digitally savvy consumer that spreads across a number of different market segments. So, the point of entry digital program for Pampers was we were the first brand on Facebook. We were the first brand on Twitter. And there's a laundry list of things that P&G or Pampers did first in terms of digitally.
Well, I can speak from experience, given I've got 4 grandkids. Number 5 is due up here soon. And I can tell you from my 2 daughters' perspectives, they'd much rather order their Pampers online than actually have to go pick up that huge box and stick it into a shopping cart and then check it out and then wheel it out and put it in the car. Having it show up on the front doorstep is obviously, much more convenient, and it's a nice, easy reorder thing, right? Because the kids are going to be in those diapers for the first couple of years.
I like to think about even Jet.com's Mark. His first company or his first e-commerce site was Diapers.com.
That's right.
Yes,
that is right.
And that sold to Amazon. Trust me, it was an extremely forward-thinking e-commerce business back in 2008 and 2007.
So were you on Pampers the entire time you were at P&G?
I was on Pampers the entire time.
Oh, wow.
The entire time.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you and I we were talking a little bit during the commercial break about the fact that we both know Bob McDonald, who was the CEO at P&G at the time. I got to know Bob because of my previous role at HP, and I got tagged on the executive team at HP as being the local guy because I knew Skyline Chili, Grater's Ice Cream, Montgomery and Ribs, so I could go to Cincinnati and entertain the Procter & Gamble executives, and I could talk the local lingo of Cincinnati. Yeah. So I ended up with the executive relationship responsibility with Bob. Who I thought was a phenomenal, CEO, given that he'd come up through the whole Procter & Gamble. What was your experience with the senior management team there? Did it change a lot with the changing when Lafley left? And
yeah, it's a promote from within culture. So you'd be surprised how the leadership all kind of resemble each other. Mm-hmm. It's just different aspects of it that are more highlighted than others. But I mean, I think Bob brought a certain level of operational excellence across the entire organization, and maybe it was the military background.
Yeah, that is kind of Bob's mode of operation. He does bring that military perspective.
Yeah, and when AG, and I was an intern when AG, and then I left, but AG had a certain sense of flair and excitement with him, given his personality. But really, their leadership style grew up in P&G, so that it all had components of each other.
Yeah, I think it helps also, reinforce and build and maintain a culture that gets established over many, many years, right? And for me, culture is critically important in any organization. I've been in organizations that have very no culture, and other organizations like HP who have an incredibly strong culture. And believe me, I'd much rather work in an organization with a strong culture where it's more predictable. The employees know what the rules are. They know how to operate. They know how to get things done. So we're going to take another quick commercial break here. When we come back, we're going to pick up our conversation with Rodney Williams, CEO and co-founder of Listener, and learn about Listener, what it does, and why I'm so excited about the product, and give Rodney a chance to share that with you, the listener. So stay tuned. Be right back. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Picking up our conversation with Rodney Williams, CEO and co-founder for Listener. So Rodney, we've been talking a lot about your background, P&G and diapers. I never thought I'd be talking about diapers on my show, but it brings up a good point, right? Of how many, in fact, we stream the show live on Facebook, and one of the listeners on Facebook just mentioned the fact that even at their company, a number of their product people all came from P&G, which is a great proving ground. So let's talk about Listener. So you leave Procter & Gamble. What was the problem? What was that itch you wanted to scratch that caused you to start Listener? What was the problem you were trying to address?
Yeah, so it's both internal and a problem that I saw. I think, number one, I had really got used to creating technology that addressed problems that I saw at P&G. By that moment, I had already, I was the first marketer to co-write on patents, and 3 of them were published today and doing really well. So I had kind of made a name for myself to be able to take a problem and create a technology to go after it. The core marketing problem that all marketers have is really understanding who's in front of a particular piece of advertising in real time. Whether that's a banner on a website, or whether that's a commercial, or whether that's a digital sign. And it was, this whole idea of maybe I could leverage sound to do so. There was another notion or another issue that I always stuck on. And it was actually a Pampers example of a dad sitting in an aisle, and he's looking at the 30 to 40 different pairs of different diapers, and he doesn't know which one to pick. I wish that if I could pay for a marketing message, it would be at that moment in time. There's specific moments in time where I think the marketing message is most receptive. And if we could direct our attention to that most receptive moment, we would get essentially our highest ROI. Now, take another steps back, go back to sound. I thought that we could, and I still do, and we have, but I felt that we could leverage sound to touch consumers where they are more effectively than any other medium. And that was the start of building or creating Listener.
So what does Listener actually do? I mean, people probably can guess from its name, but if you had to do your elevator pitch, what is Listener?
Yeah, Listener is a new standard to connect devices. We're actually sending data over high frequency audio that you can't hear. So hence the name. It's completely silent to the human ear, but devices with microphones or devices with the ability to broadcast sound have the ability to play or hear or listen to our what we call smart audio or smart tones. What's interesting about a communication standard is that it can transmit whatever information that our customers want to. So whether it is that marketing message because you're standing in store and we're playing our tones over the speaker systems, or if you're sitting on a couch at home and you're watching a television programming and we're sending information about what you're watching to your device, all of these are examples of us just sending data over audio.
And so in this case, you could have an app on your phone, it listens to the tone and it causes something to happen on the phone. Is that kind of the use case for it then?
Exactly. I mean, that is the core use case that we were founded on, about us, devices without technology, listening for the smart tone, decoding that information locally, so never making server calls to understand what to show you, and then having some level of response. One of the big innovations internally that we've now launched and is actually doing really well for the company is that we've now allowed the device to then talk back. So if this was a single directional way of data transmission, we're actually doing asynchronous or bidirectional data transmission between 2 devices. So and 2 smartphones can now talk to each other using audio. But it's a new protocol. It's a new way for devices to connect.
And so, give me an example. Who's using it?
Yeah. So even today, a significant number of stadiums and venues are using us as an alternative or in addition to iBeacon. But we're playing our tones over speaker systems, and then our tones are then triggering different messaging to you based on where you are. An example would be I walk past a corridor, I get a message, or maybe I get a complete light show because there's a touchdown score. So a lot of teams. I think we announced the Colts and the Buffalo Bills not too long ago. We have a deal across college campuses. A number of teams starting, Real Madrid, Cleveland Cavaliers. So there's a significant amount of customers doing that. There's also a group of customers that are using us as an asynchronous way of connectivity. So without giving away too much, but we have banks, financial institutions, access and security companies that are using us as an alternative to near-field communication or RFID.
So is this like for authentication, identity?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So even when you enter our anyone that comes to our office in Cincinnati, we actually send you an app that creates a smart tone based on the time of your entry, and the smart tone is your key to get into the office. So literally, it's an automated door with a microphone that's listening for our keys that are smart. But think about the use cases of that. I mean, it's a completely locally generated tone per that time with tokenization that can only be used at that moment to open the door. It's pretty secure.
Wow, that is crazy. Now, one of the listeners listening on Facebook Live did ask the question, though, of how does Listener go from kind of a B2B directly to a B2C kind of a solution?
Yeah, I think that will happen over time. I think, as we continue to drive uses of the technology, consumers will start to see how those uses or how the technology will impact their lives more. The goal of this technology is to be next to the Bluetooth button. We believe it should be on every device, and that consumers should toggle between Listener like it toggles between other technology, like GPS or Bluetooth. Now, when we get to that level of penetration or that level of what I would call engagement from the manufacturers or the OEMs, the Apples and the Googles of the world, then I think that the B2C play will be pretty prevalent.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So walk us back through the history of Listener. When did you and your co-founder start Listener?
Yeah, so I had the idea in January 2012. I wrote, the best thing I learned at P&G is that you can write a patent without actually figuring out how to make it work.
That's the trick of everybody who does patents, right? You don't have to actually build it.
No, patents don't have source code. Patents are diagrams and claims, and I got really good at that. Now, I went on a competition called the Startup Bus, where you get up and you tell your idea, and people gravitate towards your idea. That initial group that gravitated towards this idea became the initial founders. We ended up winning the Ohio Startup Bus and was on stage at South by Southwest. So that's really how we started. The next 3 months, we made it a company. It was just a presentation and a couple ideas. We submitted IP, and a group out of Cincinnati, Ohio became our seed round investors called Cincinnati.
And how much have you raised total for Listener so far?
So far, we've raised about $15.5 million. Wow.
All primarily Cincinnati, or did you reach out beyond?
No, that's probably why I'm on the road so much. No. A market like Cincinnati doesn't have a significant amount of investors. Outside of our seed round, that's probably the last bit of Cincinnati. So literally maybe 14.5 million.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Came out of Cincinnati. Intel Capital was our latest investor who led our Series B. And the biggest additional investor is out of Texas called Mercury, and Jump Capital out of Chicago.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the Intel Capital guys, I've always been impressed because they don't shy about getting in, not really, maybe really early, but somewhat early. and then they stick with it for a long period of time. The portfolio companies that they've got, plus they host some great events for the CEOs of the portfolio companies to really help build out the network. And that's probably how you got introduced to us, because we have a really close relationship with Intel Capital. They refer a lot of companies to us for the Innovation Showcase and for some of our other work. So we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick up our conversation here with Rodney Williams, CEO, co-founder for Listener. And stay right there. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Before we jump back into the show, I need to thank our sponsor, TopTal. Now, you're probably saying, hold on, Phil, you've been doing the show for a dozen years. You've never had a sponsor for the show, and you'd be absolutely correct. And I'll explain why in a second here. But the number one question I get from emails or running into people at conferences and that is the search for the best technical and design talent. Many people have great ideas, but they need people to come alongside and actually help realize that vision. Well, that's where TopTal comes in. TopTal's different. If you go back and look through the archive of the show, you'll find where I interviewed the CEO for TopTal. That was long before we had this relationship in place. I was really impressed. I went out and talked with them. I actually called their customers to understand how the customers use their service. What's different about TopTal is the screening process. Today, they're running about 1.5% of the people who apply for TopTal ever get accepted. And it's not just technical talent, but it's also design talent. And companies ranging from large companies like Pfizer and JP Morgan are using TopTal, all the way down to small startups, Airbnb and Zendesk. And what a lot of people don't realize is the technical teams behind startup companies at Y Combinator and many of the incubators are actually provided by TopTal. Now, what's different here is they're making a special offer for listeners of Killer Innovations. If you want to go off and try a project with them, a mobile app, a website, you name it, they'll match you up with just the right technical talent. It's not just technology, but it's also the personalities and relationships. Try them out for 2 weeks. If they're not killing it, then you get your money back and you get to keep all the deliverables. So hop on over to toptal.com/Phil and try that out. Or you can drop me an email at phil@killerinnovations.com and I'll make a personal introduction to Nelson and the team over at TopTal. And the benefit for me on this sponsorship isn't about money making. As you know, I've been doing the show for 12 years, funding it myself. The money I get from the sponsorship actually is going to the nonprofits, Pioneer Education, which is building schools in Africa, and Hacking Autism, developing training and educational therapy and employment opportunities for those on the autism spectrum. So the money we bring in from TopTal for sponsoring the show actually will go to the nonprofits. So again, check them out, toptal.com/Phil. Show our sponsors a little bit of love. Their help helps me with the nonprofits. And all of that comes from the benefit for you, the listeners who have been supporting me on my nonprofits for over the last 12 years, and I greatly appreciate that. So, Rodney, let's pick up where we left off. The one question I have, you've done a lot in a very short period of time, right? So if you could go back and talk to the Rodney Williams of 24 as you were graduating from college, what would be that maybe one piece of advice that you would give to yourself now that you've got a little bit of hindsight's 2020?
The real answer is, take more risk, do it faster, more aggressive. I think we, at 24, time, you don't understand time. And time is the greatest resource. It's one of the reasons why startups actually can outperform a huge corporation. The speed to market is important. Time is just an extremely valuable factor that I don't think we acknowledge at 24.
Yeah. We think we got our whole life in front of us, right?
We think we have the whole life in front of us. And if anything, I would tell myself we don't have enough time, and go for it.
So a lot of the listeners of this show are all working on their ideas or wanting to go off and, maybe they're an entrepreneur, meaning they're an innovator inside of an organization, possibly even a large organization, or they're getting that itch to go off and start something. And, both you were doing something when you were, doing something on the side while you were doing Lockheed. You started Listener. What one or two pieces of advice would you give an entrepreneur who is thinking about starting something? You've been out, you've raised a good chunk of cash, Listener's got good traction, but think back to, starting Listener. What would be the one piece of advice you would give to another entrepreneur?
Yeah, what I would give, do it because you really feel it. I think whatever it is you're going after or chasing it, you should be that passionate about it. I think you should be as passionate as anyone, but have the ability to do whatever it takes. I think when I see entrepreneurs fall short, most of the time is post a great idea or post a great concept, is the ability to just go for it and take a substantial amount of risk. And then to learn whatever it takes and to do whatever it takes and not give up. And I just think that tenacity and that persistence is important, and you just have to be ready for it. And if you're not ready for it, then maybe you're not passionate enough, and that's okay. For someone, I had tons of ideas before Listener, and they weren't great ideas, and they didn't materialize like Listener did. And I also didn't materialize as a leader or someone who had a great idea. When things started to materialize at a pace that I was not used to seeing, I knew that this was something I had to go out and figure out. So if I was to just sum that up, it would just, be persistent, be tenacious. And if you're not ready to do that, it's okay.
So Rodney, if people want to follow what you're working on and what Listener's up to, where's the best place they can find you?
Well, I'm pretty active on social. All my handles are Rodney B. Williams. So Instagram and Twitter. I'm pretty active on all of those. Please, if you want to email me, I'm Rodney at Listener, LISNR. I respond to every email. It's something I promised an investor a long time ago. So I stay true to that.
Hey, Rodney, thanks a lot. Sorry about that. I've still got this cough. I'm still trying not to cough into the microphone here. Appreciate that. Hey, Rodney, thanks for joining us on this Sunday. I'm here live for listeners. We will be here live again next week for the show. As you know, the podcast comes out on Tuesday. I will have all of Rodney's coordinates up on the show notes for the Tuesday podcast, so you can check it out over at killerinnovations.com. Also, one favor I could ask is hop over to iTunes, give us a rating, put some feedback in there. We read all of those. Look forward to hearing more from you. And you're listening to Killer Innovations on the Biz Talk Radio Network, and we will talk to you next week right here on your local radio station or on the podcast. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
You hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. biztalkradio.com.
Autism. 1 out of every 68 children in America are impacted across every race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic group. If you aren't directly affected, someone you know is. Today's world doesn't support those on the autism spectrum. It needs hacking for us to truly welcome those who think and create differently than ourselves. We're Hacking Autism, a nonprofit charity with a mission to hack therapy, technologies, and career opportunities that improve the personal and professional lives of people on the autism spectrum. We believe that everyone can play a role in supporting those on the autism spectrum so that they can show their unique talents and abilities in this fast-paced world. You aren't powerless in this fight. Use your gifts and talents to make a positive impact. Join us in making a difference. Go to hackingautism.org to learn more.
Carpenters have their hammers and saws, chefs have their outfitted kitchens, and musicians have their instruments. A craftsman's ability to do their job is dependent on having the right tools. So where does an innovator, someone who takes an idea and makes it real, find the right tools to do their job? Outfit your innovator's garage by visiting innovation.tools. Innovation.tools is an online store created by innovators for innovators. It's where you will find tested and proven tools to help you create that next great product or service. These tools include books, audio training, video training, brainstorming how-tos, and much, much more. And for a limited time, listeners of Killer Innovations will get 25% off on your first order by using the discount code RADIO at checkout. And 100% of our profits from your purchases will be donated to charity. So go to innovation.tools and create that next great innovation.
Rwanda is a shining example of how the global community can come together and rebuild a country after a devastating genocide. But there is still more that needs to be done. In the rural villages, students are crowded into schools with no electricity, no running water, no internet access, and limited sanitation. Will these kids be ready to continue the rebuilding of Rwanda, or will they be dependent upon others? Through education and employment, boys and girls have an equally promising future that can transform their struggling communities. For $20 a month, a child can be educated and a community strengthened. By supporting Pioneer Education Africa, a 501c3 charity, you partner with others to provide education that will prepare a generation to take on the task of self-reliance. 100% of the proceeds received go directly to the education of the children. Visit pioneereducationafrica.com to find out more.